My name is Corine. I'm 29 years old, and until the morning my father saw the DNA results, I thought I already understood what it felt like to be unwanted in my own family. I was wrong. There is a difference between being quietly pushed aside for years and hearing your father say it out loud in front of everyone. It happened at Sunday dinner. My mother had made roast chicken, the kind she always made when she wanted the house to feel normal. The table was set with the good plates. My brother Mason was sitting across from me, scrolling on his phone under the edge of the table like he was 16 instead of 26. My father, Victor, was at the head of the table where he always sat. That chair mattered to him. It was not just where he ate, it was where he judged. I don't remember what started it, not exactly. That is the strange thing about humiliation. People think you remember every word, but sometimes your mind protects you by keeping only the sharpest parts. I remember my father looking at me over his glass. I remember my mother's fork stopping halfway to her plate. I remember Mason smirking before anything was even funny. And then my father said very calmly, "You're not my daughter." No one moved. He said it like he had been waiting years to place those words in the center of the table, like they belonged there between the gravy boat and my mother's folded napkins. I looked at him. He leaned back a little, almost satisfied with himself. "You're nothing like me," he said. "You never have been." My mother's face went blank. Not shocked, not angry, blank. That was what hurt first. Because shock at least means something still matters. Mason laughed. It was not a loud laugh. It was worse than that. It was a short, careless sound through his nose, like my father had finally said the thing Mason had always been allowed to believe. Nobody defended me. Not my mother. Not my brother. Not the aunt sitting near the window pretending to adjust her bracelet. Not the cousin who suddenly became very interested in her mashed potatoes. The whole room went quiet in that particular family way, where everyone hears the cruelty, but everyone waits to see whether the person being hurt will make it inconvenient. I set my napkin beside my plate. My hands were steady. I remember that because I was almost surprised by it. Then I stood up. My father watched me like he expected tears, maybe shouting, maybe some desperate little performance that would let him call me unstable. I only said one word. "Okay." That was it. I picked up my bag from the back of the chair and walked out. Behind me, Mason muttered something I did not catch, and someone exhaled too loudly. My mother did not call my name. That part stayed with me all night. Not the insult. The silence after it. The next morning, my father called me back to the house. He had decided we were going to settle it, his words, not mine. There was already a laptop open on the kitchen table when I arrived. My mother stood near the sink in the same grey sweater she wore when she was anxious. Mason was there too, arms crossed, enjoying himself. My father did not ask if I was okay. He pointed at the chair. "Sit." I did. The DNA results were loading. He had pushed for the test before as a threat, as a joke, as a way to make my mother flinch. But now the account was open, the page was refreshing, and he looked almost pleased. He smiled at me. "Ready to admit you lied." I looked at the screen. The little circle spun. No one spoke. Then the page loaded. For a second, my father's expression did not change. His eyes moved once. Then again. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The color left his face so quickly, it looked almost physical, like something had reached across the table and pulled it out of him. Mason leaned forward. "What?" he said. My mother whispered, "Victor." My father stared at the screen. Then very quietly he said, "Wait, this doesn't make sense." And that was the first time in my life I saw my father look afraid of the truth. Stay with me, please hit like and subscribe, because what that test revealed was not just about blood. It was about who had been lying, who had been protected, and who had been punished for telling the truth without even knowing it. Now let me take you back. Before that Sunday dinner, before the laptop, before my father's face went pale in the kitchen light, there was a house where I learned how to be quiet. It was a two-story house with beige siding, a narrow front porch, and a maple tree that dropped leaves into the gutters every fall. My father complained about that tree every year, but he never cut it down because his mother had loved it. That was how our family worked. Some things were kept because they belonged to the right person. Some things were neglected because they did not. I grew up understanding that difference before I had words for it. Mason looked like my father, same square jaw, same dark eyes, same easy confidence when he entered a room. People said it constantly. That boy is Victor all over again. My father loved hearing that. He would clap Mason on the shoulder and smile like resemblance was an achievement. With me, people hesitated. I had my mother's lighter eyes but not her softness. I was quiet but not in a sweet way people could praise. I liked books, neat lists, locked drawers, clean calendars. I remembered things adults forgot saying. I noticed when voices changed in the hallway. My father used to say, "I don't know where you get that from." At first, I thought he meant it casually. Later, I understood he meant it as an accusation. I was not a bad child. I did my homework. I helped clear dishes. I learned which floorboards creaked near my parents' room and which cabinets stuck in the kitchen. I knew how to fold towels the way my mother liked them and how to answer my father without sounding too eager or too flat. Still, something about me irritated him. If I cried, I was sensitive. If I did not cry, I was cold. If I did well in school, I thought I was better than everyone. If I stayed quiet at dinner, I was making the room uncomfortable. There was no right size for me in that house. So I made myself useful. Useful was safer than loved. Useful could not be denied as easily. Every Sunday, my mother cooked dinner. She said it kept the family together. I believed her for a long time because children believe the person setting the table must also understand what a table is for. But in our house, dinner was not about togetherness. It was where my father measured everyone. Mason usually passed without trying. I usually failed without knowing the question. And my mother kept serving food like silence was a side dish. I used to think that was peace. I did not know yet that peace without protection is just fear with better manners. The one memory I held onto came from when I was 8. It was raining that day, hard enough that the windows looked silver. My grandmother had come over for tea, and on the mantel in the living room sat a small blue ceramic bird. It had belonged to her for years. Pale blue glaze, tiny painted eyes, one wing lifted like it was about to fly. I was reaching for a book. My sleeve caught the edge. The bird fell. It hit the floor and broke cleanly into 3 pieces. I froze. I expected my father to yell. I had already started saying I was sorry before he even entered the room. But he didn't yell. He crouched beside me, picked up the pieces and said, "Go get the glue from the junk drawer." I remember sitting with him at the kitchen table while the rain tapped against the glass. He put a dish towel down and lined the broken pieces carefully on top of it. "Hold this wing," he said. So I held it. My fingers were sticky with glue. I was scared to breathe too hard. He worked slowly, with tweezers and patience I did not usually see in him. When the wing finally stayed in place, he leaned back and looked at it. Then he said, "Some things are worth fixing carefully." For years I kept that sentence like proof. Proof that he could be gentle. Proof that maybe, somewhere under all the criticism, there was a version of my father who knew how to hold something broken without blaming it for breaking. I did not know then how much I would need that memory. And I did not know the little blue bird would one day become the thing my family wanted back most. Not because they loved it. Because they had no idea what was hidden inside. After that day, I started watching my father differently. Not in a suspicious way. I was 8. I still believed adults were mostly telling the truth, even when they were unfair. But I began storing that kitchen table memory somewhere private. Whenever he was sharp with me, I would go back to the rain on the windows. Whenever he compared me to Mason, I would remember his hands holding broken ceramic pieces with care. It became a small argument I had with myself. He can be gentle. He was gentle once. Maybe I had just done something wrong the other times. That was easier to believe than the truth. Mason never had to make those kinds of bargains in his head. For him, love in our house came easily. It came with extra bacon at breakfast and hand claps on the shoulder. It came with my father standing in the driveway, watching him throw a football badly and still saying, "That's my boy." Mason was not a terrible child, not at first. He was loud, careless, and spoiled in the way children become spoiled when nobody asks them to notice anyone else. If he interrupted, people laughed. If I corrected him, I was being difficult. If he left his dishes in the sink, my mother sighed and washed them. If I left a mug on the counter, my father asked why I expected everyone to clean up after me. Little things. Always little things. That is what people who grew up loved do not always understand. It is rarely one giant moment at the beginning. It is the small unevenness, repeated so often it becomes the shape of the room. At school I learned to be neat. My folders were labelled. My assignments were turned in early. I kept permission slips in the front pocket of my backpack because my mother forgot dates when she was stressed, and she was stressed more often than she admitted. I was not trying to be impressive. I was trying to be low maintenance. But even that bothered my father. One evening in middle school, I brought home a certificate from a science fair. It was printed on thick cream paper, with my name in blue ink. I remember smoothing the corner before handing it to him. He looked at it for a few seconds. Then he said, "You get that from your mother." I waited for more. There was no more. Mason had gotten a C in history that same week, and my father spent 20 minutes telling him grades did not measure common sense. I stood near the fridge with my certificate in my hand, feeling foolish for having expected anything. My mother saw my face. She smiled too quickly and said, "Let's put it on the refrigerator." She found a magnet shaped like a strawberry and pinned it there, crooked. My father glanced at it during dinner and said, "Don't let it go to your head." Nobody laughed that time. Nobody defended me either. That was how my mother kept peace. She moved things along. She refilled glasses. She asked about homework. She turned up the kitchen radio while washing dishes. Sometimes, when my father's voice got too hard, she touched the base of her throat like she was checking if something was still there. I used to think she was tired. Now I think silence has weight. Maybe she had been carrying hers for so long that her body had learned where to hold it. The blue bird stayed on the mantel for years after we repaired it. Its wing had a thin, pale line where the glue dried. You could see the crack if you looked closely, but from across the room it still looked whole. I liked that. I liked things that could look whole from far away. When my grandmother visited, she always noticed me looking at it. "You still love that little bird?" she asked once. I nodded. She smiled and said, "Good, it remembers you." I did not understand what she meant. I just liked the way she said it, like objects could keep track of tenderness when people forgot. My grandmother was different from the rest of them. She did not talk over quiet people. She had soft white hair, careful hands, and a habit of saving receipts in envelopes marked by month. Every Christmas, she gave Mason something loud and expensive because that was what everyone expected. But she gave me books with notes inside the covers. Not long notes. Just things like "For Corine who notices," or "For Corine who listens." I kept every one. My father used to roll his eyes when she praised me. "She's just quiet, Mom," he would say. Grandma would look at him over her glasses. "Quiet is not empty, Victor." He never liked that. The year I turned 17, my grandmother got sick. Not all at once. That would have been easier to understand. It happened in errands, pill bottles, appointment cards, and phone calls my mother took in the laundry room. I drove Grandma to a few appointments after I got my license. I filled out forms because her hands shook. I learned the difference between primary insurance and supplemental insurance before I learned how to parallel park properly. I wrote down medication times on a yellow legal pad and taped it to her refrigerator. Nobody asked me to. It just needed doing. Mason visited her when my father told him to. He brought flowers once and left them in the plastic sleeve on the counter. My father stopped by on Sundays and talked mostly about the cost of care. My mother cooked casseroles and cried in the car where no one could ask her questions. Grandma never made me feel like helping her was proof I was useful. She made me tea in chipped cups and asked what I was reading. Sometimes we sat without talking, the TV low in the background, the smell of menthol lotion and old paper filling the room. One afternoon she told me, "You don't have to earn a place, Corine." I looked up from sorting her mail. She was watching me with an expression I could not read then. I said, "I know." But I did not know. Not really. After she died, the house changed in a way I could feel before anyone said anything. My father became sharper. My mother became softer around the edges, like she was apologizing to the air. Mason complained about having to wear a tie to the funeral. The reading of my grandmother's will happened in a small office that smelled like coffee and printer toner. There were folders stacked on the attorney's desk. My father sat with his ankle over his knee, impatient. Mason checked his phone twice. My mother kept a tissue folded in her palm. Most of what Grandma left was simple: jewelry to my mother, some savings divided in practical ways, a few household things listed by name. Then the attorney read, "The blue ceramic bird is to go to Corine." My father's head turned. Just slightly. But I saw it. The attorney continued like it was nothing. To him, it was just an object on a page. To me, it was the kitchen table, the rain, my fingers sticky with glue, my father saying some things were worth fixing carefully. My mother looked down. Mason muttered, "That old thing." And my father said nothing. That was what made it strange. He always had something to say. When we got home, I took the bird from the mantel myself. It felt lighter than I expected. The repaired wing was cool under my thumb. My father watched from the doorway. "She always liked giving things away," he said. I paused. "She left it to me." I heard. His voice was flat. I waited for him to say it was fine, or that Grandma knew I loved it, or even that I should be careful with it. Instead, he turned and walked down the hall. I wrapped the bird in an old dish towel and carried it to my room. That night, I put it on my bookshelf between two novels Grandma had given me. For a while, I just sat on the edge of my bed and looked at it. I told myself my father was grieving. I told myself people acted strange after funerals. I told myself not every silence meant rejection. I was good at giving everyone else better explanations than they deserved. But even then, some small part of me understood that the bird had changed places in the family. It was no longer just a repaired object on the mantel. It was mine now. And my father had noticed. I did not know what was hidden inside it. I did not know why my grandmother had made sure it came to me. I only knew that, for the first time, something from that house had chosen me on paper. And years later, when my family tried to pretend it never belonged to me at all, I would remember the attorney's voice, the folder on his desk, and my father's silence when he realized he could not take it back. By the time I was in college, my father's comments had stopped sounding accidental. They came at ordinary moments, which made them harder to explain to anyone outside the house. A holiday photo. A report card. A family dinner where someone said Mason had Victor's smile. My father would look at Mason first, proud before he even spoke. "That's my boy," he would say. Then his eyes would slide to me. "And you," he'd add, like I was a separate category he had not agreed to. Sometimes he smiled when he said it. That was the part that confused people. If you only heard the tone, you might think he was teasing. But I knew the difference. Teasing leaves a place for you to laugh. My father's jokes left me standing outside the room, trying to decide whether defending myself would make things worse. "You don't get that from me," he said once when I turned down a second serving of steak because I had an exam early the next morning. Mason grinned. "Yeah, Dad, she's too refined for us." My father chuckled. My mother reached for the salad bowl. "Corine has always liked lighter food," she said quickly. "Who wants more rolls?" That was how she did it. Not protection. Redirection. The subject would change and the bruise would stay. I started noticing how often she moved the room away from discomfort instead of stopping the person causing it. She would clear plates before a conversation could turn ugly. She would ask Mason about work. She would tell my father the trash pickup was delayed or that the neighbor's dog had gotten loose again. Small exits. Tiny doors. Never a wall between me and him. Mason learned from it. He learned that if my father took a small swing at me, the room would make space for it. He learned that if he repeated the joke, it became family humor instead of cruelty. When I came home one weekend with a stack of books and a planner full of deadlines, Mason picked one up and said, "Do you schedule when to blink too?" I took it from him. No. My father looked up from the news. "Don't be so serious, he's joking." Mason leaned back, pleased. "See, this is why nobody can say anything around you." I remember standing there with my planner against my chest, not because I was afraid he would take it, but because holding something made my hands look less empty. The blue bird sat on the bookshelf in my old room whenever I came home. I always checked it before I unpacked. It became a habit. Keys on the desk. Bag by the closet. Bird still there. I never told anyone that. It would have sounded strange. But the house had a way of making me feel temporary, and that little bird was the one thing in it that did not belong to Mason by default or my father by authority. It was mine. On paper. In ink. Some nights after dinner I would go upstairs and run my thumb along the repaired wing. The crack was still there, thin and pale. I could feel it more than see it. I would remember my father's hands at the kitchen table and try to match that man with the one downstairs saying, "You act like you're above this family." I was not above them. Most of the time I was just trying not to sink. After college I got a job at a small accounting firm 2 towns over. Nothing glamorous, regular hours, health insurance. A desk near the copy machine that jammed every Thursday for no reason. I liked the order of it. Numbers did not change their meaning because someone was in a bad mood. Forms had boxes. Deadlines were written down. If something was missing, the system told you where to look. When I told my family about the job, my mother hugged me too tightly. "That's wonderful," she said. Mason said, "So you're going to be one of those people who gets excited about spreadsheets?" I said, "Probably." My father looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Well, at least you found something that fits your personality." It was not loud, it did not have to be. I waited. My mother smiled like she was trying to hold the room together with her face. "It's stable," she said, "that matters." Victor shrugged. I didn't say it didn't. But he had said enough. Family dinners became worse after I started doing well on my own. I had thought independence would make me less of a target. I thought if I paid my bills, kept my apartment clean, remembered birthdays and showed up when asked, there would be less for him to criticize. But competence irritated him. It gave him nothing to rescue. Nothing to claim. So he found other things. "You always talk like you're in a meeting. You make everything so formal. You never just relax like normal people." One Sunday, while Mason was telling a story about arguing with his supervisor and somehow making it sound heroic, my father laughed and said, "That's the old Victor temper. Runs in the blood." Mason pointed his fork at him. "You know it." My father looked satisfied. Then, almost lazily, he looked at me. Corine never had much of that. I kept cutting my chicken. "No," I said, "I guess not." He watched me longer than he needed to. "You don't have much of me in you at all, do you?" The room went still in a very small way. Not enough for an outsider to notice. Enough for me to feel the air change. My mother's hand tightened around her water glass. Mason smirked. "Maybe she's adopted." He said it like a joke. My father laughed once. My mother stood too quickly. "I forgot the green beans," she said. The green beans were already on the table. No one corrected her. She walked to the counter, picked up the serving dish that was sitting beside my father's plate, and then seemed to realize what she had done. For half a second she just stood there holding it. I looked at her. She would not look back. After that, the comments about blood came more often. Not constantly, that would have been easier to name. They came just enough to make me question whether I was being too sensitive. At birthdays, my father would compare Mason's baby pictures to his own. At Christmas, he would say Mason had the family hands. At dinner, he would glance at me and say, "Your mother's side, maybe." My mother always found something to do when he said things like that. Check the oven. Fold a napkin. Wipe a clean counter. Once I asked her about it while we were alone in the kitchen. Mason and my father were in the living room, arguing happily about football. The dishwasher was humming. My mother was wrapping leftovers in foil. "Does it bother you when he says that?" I asked. She did not look up. "Says what?" "That I don't seem like him." Her fingers pressed the foil too tightly over the bowl. "You know your father," she said. "He says things." "That doesn't answer me." She finally looked at me then, and for a second I saw something almost like fear. Then it vanished. "Don't start tonight, Corine." I remember the way she said my name. Tired. Warning. Almost pleading. So I stopped. That was another thing I learned in that house. Sometimes asking the obvious question made you the problem. The first time my father said I did not look like him, really said it without a joke wrapped around it, I was 24. It was after Sunday dinner. Rain was tapping lightly against the kitchen windows, not hard like the day with the bird, just enough to make the glass look dark. I was helping my mother rinse dishes. My father was looking through an old photo album at the table because Mason had found it in the hall closet. Mason held up a picture of himself as a toddler. "Mini Dad," he said. Victor smiled, no denying that one. Then he turned a page. There was a picture of me at about 5, standing in the backyard with a sunburned nose and uneven bangs. My father studied it. "Too long." Then he said, "You know, Corine never did look like me." The glass slipped from my mother's hand. It hit the edge of the sink, bounced once and shattered on the tile. Nobody spoke. My mother stared down at the pieces. My father looked at her. Mason laughed awkwardly and said, "Geez, Mom." I reached for a towel. My mother said too fast, "Don't, I'll get it." Her voice was thin. I remember the broken glass glittering near her bare foot. I remember my father closing the photo album slowly. And I remember understanding, before I could prove anything, that my mother had not dropped that glass because her hand slipped. After the glass broke, my mother cleaned the kitchen like she was trying to erase the sound. She swept twice. Then she wiped the tile with a damp paper towel, even though there was nothing left to wipe. My father had gone quiet in the living room. Mason turned the television louder. I stood by the counter holding the towel she had not let me use, and I remember thinking that everyone was acting like something had happened by accident. But no one was acting accidental. For a while, I did nothing with that feeling. I went back to work, paid rent, answered emails, filed quarterly reports. I kept showing up for Sunday dinners because my mother still called every Friday and said it would be nice to have everyone together. Together. That word did a lot of work in our house. A few months after the glass incident, my mother called me on a Tuesday morning while I was at my desk. "Do you have time this weekend?" she asked. I could hear paper rustling in the background. "For what?" The upstairs bathroom leaked into the hallway closet. Your father thinks some of the old files got damp. That was how I ended up sitting on the floor of my parents' guest room on a Saturday afternoon, surrounded by cardboard boxes, insurance folders, appliance manuals, tax returns, old warranty receipts, and medical paperwork my mother had saved in no obvious order. The carpet smelled faintly like mildew. The window was cracked open, and the curtains moved every time the wind came through. My mother had labelled one box house, one box medical, and one box MISC, which was where every family secret seemed to go when nobody wanted to name it. She knelt across from me, sorting quickly. "Too quickly. Anything before 2010 can probably be shredded," she said. "Even medical records." She paused. "Most of them." I looked up. She did not. I was used to paperwork. At my job, dates mattered, names mattered, missing pages mattered. So when I found an old folder with my name on it, I noticed the details before I understood the feeling. My birth certificate copy. Vaccination records. A hospital discharge form. A pediatric intake sheet from when I was 5. Then another document, older and folded into the wrong file. It had my mother's name on it. Not my father's. There was another name listed as an emergency contact, a man's name I did not recognize. I read it once. Then again. The date was close to my birth year, too close to be meaningless but not clear enough to be proof of anything. My mother reached for the paper before I finished looking. "Oh, that's old," she said. Her voice had changed. I held it for half a second longer than I needed to. "Who's Daniel Mercer?" The room seemed to shrink around the question. My mother blinked. Then she smiled in that thin, practiced way she used when company asked something too personal. "An old friend. From before Dad." "Yes." She took the paper from my hand and slid it under a stack of appliance receipts. "Too casual. Too neat." I let her do it. That was important. I had learned that panic tells you more when it thinks you are not watching. A few minutes later, I found an old calendar page tucked inside a folder from the year I was born. There were appointments marked in my mother's handwriting. Ob visit, lab work, call D, then one entry scratched out so hard the paper was almost torn. I ran my finger over the indentation. My mother said, "Corine, could you go downstairs and get more trash bags?" I looked at the page. Then at her. "Sure." When I came back, the folder was gone. She had moved it. Not hidden well, just away from me. That was the first time the secret felt like something with edges. I still did not confront her. I did not know what I would even ask. "Are you lying about what? About me? About him? About all of it?" Questions like that do not fit easily into a room full of damp insurance papers. So I tied trash bags. I stacked files. I carried boxes to the hallway. I acted normal because my mother was watching for abnormal. Later that afternoon, Mason came by to pick up a tool my father had borrowed from him. He found me sitting beside 3 folders and a label maker, and he laughed. "Of course you're alphabetizing trauma." I peeled a label off carefully. "Insurance papers. Same thing in this family." My mother said Mason. But there was no weight behind it. He leaned against the doorframe. "What are you digging for, Corine? Proof you had a tragic childhood." I looked at him. He grinned like he had said something clever. "You always do that," he said, "that wounded librarian thing." I put the label on a folder marked Home REPARS. "I'm helping moms." "Right." He glanced toward the hallway, then lowered his voice just enough to make it feel private. "You know, Dad wouldn't be so hard on you if you stopped acting like an outsider all the time." I did not answer. That bothered him more than arguing would have. He pushed off the doorframe and left, calling downstairs, "Dad, she's organizing your life up here." My father shouted back, "Good, maybe she'll find where your common sense went." Mason laughed. It was easy between them. Even the insults had warmth. Mine never did. At dinner that night, my father was in one of his legacy moods. He had those sometimes after dealing with house repairs or money. Anything involving ownership made him talk like he was giving a speech to invisible descendants. "This house will stay in the family," he said, cutting into his pork chop. "That matters, you don't just let everything scatter." Mason nodded. "It makes sense." My father looked pleased. "Blood means something," he said. "People forget that now." My mother set her glass down very carefully. I noticed. I also noticed she did not drink from it again. My father turned to me. "You probably think that's old-fashioned." I didn't say anything. "You don't have to, your face says plenty." Mason smirked. My mother stood. "I'll get the coffee." Nobody had asked for coffee. After dinner, I went upstairs to get my sweater from my old room. The blue ceramic bird was still on the bookshelf where I had left it years earlier, between 2 of Grandma's books. I picked it up without thinking. The house always made me check. This time, something inside it shifted. A faint rattle. I froze. Then I shook it once gently. There it was again. Soft, dry, hidden. I turned the bird over, but the base looked sealed. The felt pad underneath was old, slightly lifted at one corner, dusty around the edge. I assumed it was a chip from when it broke years ago. A bead of dried glue, something harmless trapped inside. Still, I held it longer than usual. The repaired wing pressed into my palm. Behind me, the doorway creaked. My mother was standing there. She was looking at the bird. Not at me. At the bird. Her face had gone still in the same way it had at the sink when the glass shattered. I said I was just checking it. She swallowed. Checking what? The bird. Her eyes flicked to mine. Then back to the blue ceramic body in my hand. For a second, I thought she might ask me to put it down. Instead, she said very softly, "You should be careful with that." I am. I mean, she stopped. Downstairs, Mason laughed at something my father said. The sound rose through the floorboards like the house was reminding us who was allowed to be comfortable there. My mother stepped back from the doorway. "Dinner getting cold," she said. Dinner was already over. I looked down at the bird again. Then at my mother. And for the first time, I had the strange thought that she was not afraid I would break it. She was afraid it would say something. I did not sleep much after that. Not because I had decided anything. That would make it sound cleaner than it was. Mostly I lay in bed in my apartment with my phone face down on the nightstand, thinking about the way my mother looked at the bird. Then I would tell myself I was overreacting. Then I would remember the folder disappearing. Daniel Mercer, the glass breaking, my father saying blood means something. By morning, I had made coffee I barely drank and opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it House. Then I changed it to Family. Then I changed it again to Documents. That felt safest. I started with what I had. I wrote down dates I remembered: the day the glass broke, the weekend with the damp paperwork, the name from the medical form, the year my grandmother's will was read. I took pictures of the bird from every side and saved them to the folder, even though I felt strange doing it. It was not evidence of anything. Not yet. But it was something I did not want anyone else defining for me later. That became the quiet rule. If something felt wrong, I kept a copy. Not to hurt anyone. To stop myself from being talked out of what I had seen. My father started pushing harder soon after that. It was like the house repair, the files, and his own comments had opened a door in him he did not know how to close. At the next dinner, he watched me pass the salt to Mason and said, "You know, sometimes I look at the two of you and wonder how you came from the same family." Mason laughed with food in his mouth. "Dad, what? It's true." My father pointed his fork toward him first. "You, I understand." Then the fork shifted toward me. "Her, I never have." My mother said, "Victor, please." That was new. Not strong. Not protective. But new enough that my father looked at her. "What? Not tonight." He leaned back. "Why? It's just an observation." I took a sip of water. Mason looked at me over the rim of his glass. "Don't make that face." "I'm not making a face." "You always are," he said, "like you're above us." There it was again. Above. Outside. Different. Words they used like labels, then acted confused when I started reading them. Later, while my mother wrapped leftovers, she followed me into the hallway. "You have to stop taking everything so personally," she said softly. I looked at her. The kitchen light was behind her, making her face look tired and pale. "He said he doesn't understand me." "He doesn't mean it the way you hear it." "How does he mean it?" She pressed her lips together. That was always where her explanations ended. I waited 1 second longer than I usually did. Then I said, "Mom." Her eyes filled too quickly. "Please," she whispered, "just let things be normal." Normal. That was another word that did a lot of work. A week later, Mason called me while I was driving home from work. I almost did not answer, but my mother had been sending tense little texts all day, asking if I was coming Sunday, asking if I was upset, asking if I could just be kind to my father because he was under stress. Mason did not bother with hello. Can you not do this whole wounded thing at dinner? I checked my mirrors and changed lanes. What thing? You know what thing? No, Mason, I don't. He sighed like I was exhausting him on purpose. Dad's hard on you because you make it hard not to be. You act like being related to us is some burden. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. That's what you called to say. I'm saying maybe stop acting like a tragic outsider, and he'll stop treating you like one. There was a pause. Then he added, and for the record, if you ever did a DNA test, I think Dad would be the one laughing. I do not know why that sentence landed differently. Maybe because he said it so casually. Maybe because I could hear my father in it. Maybe because my mother's fear had already made space for it. I pulled into my parking lot and sat with the engine running. What do you mean? Mason laughed. Relax, it was a joke. But he hung up too quickly. That night I saved the call log. Just the time, the date, his name. Small things. A few days later my father texted me. Not a greeting, not a question. Just, maybe a DNA test would finally settle why you act like a stranger in this family. I stared at it for a long time. Then another message came through. Unless you're afraid of what it'll show. I took a screenshot. Then I set the phone down and went to the kitchen. I washed a mug that was already clean. I wiped the counter. I folded a dish towel into a square and then unfolded it again. I could feel something in me wanting to answer. Not loudly, not angrily. Just enough to say, you don't get to do this. Instead, I opened my laptop. There were at-home DNA kits online, too many choices, different companies, different delivery times, different privacy policies written in language most people probably skipped. I read them. I checked processing windows. I looked at terms about biological relatives and match sharing. It felt clinical. That helped. A swab, a tube, a barcode, a prepaid envelope. Proof reduced to instructions. When I ordered the kit, I did not feel brave. I felt tired. The box arrived on a Thursday, small and plain, with my name printed on a shipping label. I brought it inside and set it on my table beside my mail, my keys, and a grocery receipt for eggs and dish soap. For a while I just looked at it. Then I took another screenshot of my father's message and put it in the folder. Documents. My mother changed after that. She became softer in a way that made me more nervous, not less. She texted good morning. She asked if I was eating enough. She offered to make soup, even though I was not sick. At dinner, she touched my shoulder when she passed behind my chair. I wanted that to comfort me. It didn't. Because every gentle thing from her felt attached to something she still would not say. My father, on the other hand, became almost cheerful. He asked twice whether the kit had come. He called it clearing the air. He said truth is truth, like truth was a tool he had already measured for his hand. Mason treated it like entertainment. He sent me a meme about switched-at birth Barbies and then wrote, "Don't worry, we'll still invite you to Christmas if it's bad." I screenshotted that too. Not because it mattered legally. Because one day I knew someone might tell me I had imagined the cruelty. Before the dinner that changed everything, I went to my old room to get the blue bird. I had left it there too long. The house did not feel like a safe place for anything of mine anymore. I wrapped it in a soft t-shirt and placed it carefully inside a small box. When I lifted it, the faint rattle sounded again. I stopped. For a second I thought about peeling back the felt bottom, just to see. Then my mother called from downstairs. "Corine, are you coming?" Her voice was too bright. I closed the box. Not yet, I thought. I carried it out to my car before dinner and set it on the passenger side floor, where no one would see it. When I came back inside, my father was already at the table. He looked at me and smiled. "There she is," he said, cold as ever. I sat down. I remember smoothing the napkin on my lap. I remember hearing Mason laugh under his breath. I remember my mother watching me like she wanted to warn me, but had spent too many years forgetting how. And I remember thinking, very calmly, that my father had mistaken silence for emptiness. He did not understand. I was not cold. I was done begging fire not to burn me. The dinner started quietly. That was the part people never understand when they hear the worst sentence someone said to you. They imagine shouting first, broken plates, a room already on fire. But that night began with ordinary sounds. My mother setting down serving spoons. Mason scraping his chair against the floor. My father cutting into chicken like he had not already decided what kind of evening it would be. I sat with my napkin smoothed flat over my lap. My phone was in my purse. The screenshots were saved. The DNA kit had been mailed back days earlier, and the lab portal had said the results were processing. Not ready yet. That was what I thought. Not yet. My father asked about my job, not because he cared, because he liked questions that sounded polite until they turned. Still doing tax forms for strangers. Mostly business accounts, I said. Right, very important. Mason smiled at his plate. I took a bite of food and chewed slowly. My mother glanced at me once, then at my father, then down at her hands. She looked tired in a way that made me almost sorry for her. Almost. Because I knew by then that tired people could still choose who they let bleed. My father set his fork down. You know what your problem is, Corine. No one said anything. Not even Mason. You think quiet makes you better than everyone. I looked at him. I don't think that. You act like it, he leaned back. You sit there with that blank face like nothing touches you. My mother said, Victor. He lifted one hand without looking at her. No, I'm tired of pretending we don't all see it. Mason gave a small laugh, the kind he used when he wanted to join in, but was waiting to see how cruel he was allowed to be. My father turned his eyes fully on me. Look at you, he said, you're nothing like me. The room changed. It was not dramatic, the lights did not flicker, no music swelled, but something went still in the walls. My father's voice dropped. Sometimes I wonder if you're even my daughter. My mother froze. That was the moment that told me more than his words did. Her fork stayed in her hand, angled over the plate. Her mouth parted slightly, but nothing came out. She did not look shocked like a woman hearing a cruel accusation. She looked like someone hearing a locked door open. Mason laughed. A short, ugly sound. Dad, he said, but he was smiling. My father did not smile back, he was watching me. Waiting. I think he wanted tears, or anger, or maybe a confession I did not have to give. I placed my fork on the edge of my plate. Carefully. I pushed my chair back. The legs made a soft sound against the floor. My mother's eyes finally moved to mine. For 1 second, she looked like she might say my name. She didn't. So I stood. I picked up my purse. And I said, okay. That one word did something strange to the room. It left them with themselves. No argument to chase, no emotional scene to blame on me, no proof that I was unstable or dramatic or difficult. Just what he had said. And the silence everyone had chosen afterward. I walked out through the front door, the porch light was on. My car sat in the driveway with the little box on the passenger side floor, the blue bird wrapped inside it. I sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. My hands did not shake until I was halfway home. The next morning, my father texted before 8. Come over, results are in. No hello. No apology. A second message arrived before I answered. Time to settle this. I stared at the words while my coffee went cold beside the sink. Then I opened my laptop, checked the portal and saw the same notification. Results available. I did not open them there. I do not know why. Maybe because part of me already understood that whatever truth was waiting, my father needed witnesses more than he needed answers. When I got to the house, the laptop was already on the kitchen table. Same table where he had repaired the bird. Same table where he had measured me for years and found me wrong. My mother stood near the sink in a pale sweater, arms wrapped around herself. Mason leaned against the counter with his phone in one hand. My father sat at the table like a judge. He smiled when I walked in. Ready to admit you lied. I didn't lie. We'll see. I sat down across from him. He had the portal open, the cursor hovered over the results link. No one asked if I wanted privacy. No one asked if I was ready. My father clicked. The page loaded slowly. A spinning circle appeared in the center of the screen. Mason muttered, "This is insane." My mother whispered, "Victor, maybe we should." "No," he said, "truth is truth." Then the page opened. At first my eyes went to my own name. Then to his. Then to the line that reduced 29 years of confusion into clean, clinical language. Probability of paternity excluded. I read it twice. There it was. My father was not my biological father. For a second, everything inside me went very quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Like my body knew this was too large to feel all at once. My father stood so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. I knew it. My mother made a sound, not quite crying, not quite breathing. I knew it, he said again louder, turning toward her. All these years. Mason's smile faded a little, but not enough. My father pointed at me. And you, sitting here like some wounded saint. I looked at my mother. She was crying now, silently, one hand over her mouth. I asked, "How long did you know?" She did not answer. That was the answer. My father started talking again, words like betrayal, disgrace, humiliation, my house, my name. But I was still looking at the screen. Because under the first section, there was another match summary. A family relationship estimate. Mason's name appeared lower on the page because he had submitted a sample too. My father had insisted, joking that it would prove what real family looked like. I leaned closer. There was a mismatch. Not small. Not a technicality. The screen showed that Mason and Victor were not a parent-child match either. At first, I thought I had read it wrong. Then I saw Mason's expression change. He had seen it too. My father stopped mid-sentence. "What?" he snapped. I turned the laptop slightly toward him. He looked down. His eyes moved over the lines. Once, twice. The outrage drained from his face, replaced by something I had never seen there before. Fear. He whispered, "Wait, this doesn't make sense." My mother said, "Please close it." No one moved. Mason straightened from the counter. "What does that mean?" My father did not answer him. He looked at my mother like the floor had opened under only his chair. Then somehow, even then, he tried to divide the truth. "This," he said, pointing toward my result, "this is different." I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because there it was. The rule underneath all the rules. My result was betrayal. Mason's result was complicated. My blood made me disposable. His blood needed interpretation. My father sat down slowly. Mason's face had gone flat, calculating in a way that made him look older. My mother kept whispering, "Please, please, not like this." I looked at all of them. And for the first time, I understood that blood had never been the standard in our family. Control was. My father wanted truth when it made him powerful. My mother wanted silence when truth made her accountable. Mason wanted family when family protected his place. And me. I had been asked to be grateful for a seat at a table where nobody had ever planned to protect me. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Then Mason looked at me. Not at our mother. Not at my father. At me. His voice was smaller than usual but not softer. "Wait," he said, "this doesn't change the will, right?" Mason's question sat in the kitchen longer than it should have. No one answered him. My father looked at him like he had just realized the son he had praised for being practical had only learned the worst parts of him. My mother covered her face. I stood up. Not fast, not dramatically. Just enough to end my part in that room. Corine, my mother said. It was the first time she had said my name since the results loaded. I looked at her. She lowered her hands, her cheeks were wet. Please don't destroy this family. That sentence did something to me. Not because it was unexpected. Because it was so familiar. Even then, after everything, she was asking me to protect the shape of the thing that had never protected me. I didn't do this, I said. I know, but... No, I said quietly, there isn't a but. My father was still staring at the laptop. His whole body looked smaller, not weak, just reduced, like the room had taken back all the authority he had borrowed from it. Mason followed me into the hallway when I grabbed my purse. Wait, he said, keeping his voice low. I turned. He glanced toward the kitchen before speaking. You're not going to tell people, right? Tell people what? He looked irritated, like I was making him say the ugly part out loud. You knows about me. I just watched him. He shifted his weight. This is Mom's fault, and Dad's going to freak out. I just need time to figure out what this means. What it means for who? For the family. But he did not mean family. He meant the house. The accounts. The will. The place he thought had been promised to him because he had been chosen loudly enough. I said, you laughed last night. His face tightened. That was different. It was always different when it was me. I walked past him. Outside, the morning air felt too bright. My car was still in the driveway. The little box sat on the passenger side floor, exactly where I had left it. I had one hand on the door when my father came out. He did not apologize. He did not ask if I was okay. He looked at the box through the open car door. What's that? I did not answer quickly enough. His eyes narrowed. Is that my mother's bird? I felt something cold move through me. My grandmother left it to me. His jaw tightened. That belonged in this house. It was given to me. You have no right to it now. There it was. Not the DNA result. Not the years of comments. That sentence. Because the bird was not money to me, it was not status, it was not proof I had beaten anyone. It was the one memory I had kept of him being gentle. The one thing from that house that had chosen me without asking what blood was in my veins. I picked up the box. My right to it was never yours to decide. He stepped closer, Corine. I got into the car and closed the door. He stood in the driveway as I backed out, and for once I did not try to read his face. At my apartment, I set the box on my kitchen table and did not open it for almost an hour. I made tea. I let it go cold. I changed out of my dinner clothes even though it was morning. Then I sat down and unwrapped the blue ceramic bird. It looked the same as it always had, pale blue, one wing lifted, a thin repaired line where my 8-year-old fingers had held it still. When I moved it, the rattle sounded again. This time I did not ignore it. I turned it over carefully. The felt underneath had loosened more at one corner. I used the tip of a butter knife, slow and careful, not wanting to damage anything. The felt peeled back with a dry whisper. Beneath it was a small circular opening covered by a ceramic plug. My hands stopped. I almost called my mother. I almost asked for permission to know what had already been left to me. Instead, I kept going. The plug came loose with a soft click. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, tucked tight into the hollow base. My grandmother's handwriting was on the outside. For Corine. I sat there for a long time before opening it. The first line was simple. My sweet girl, if you found this, then someone has made you question where you belong. I pressed my fingers against my mouth. Not to stop crying. To stay quiet while something inside me finally broke where no one could use it. She wrote that she had known there were things my mother had never said. She did not claim to know every detail. She did not turn it into gossip. She only said she had watched me grow up in a house where people mistook resemblance for loyalty. Then she wrote, "Family is not proven by blood. It is proven by who stays tender when pride turns cruel." I read that sentence 3 times. There was more. A small account had been placed in my name years earlier. Not large, not life-changing money, enough for security. Enough for first and last month's rent. She had written, "If one day you need a door that closes gently behind you." She said it was because I had sat with her at appointments, sorted her medication, made tea without being asked, and never made her feel like care was a debt. At the bottom, she had written the sentence I already knew. "Some things are worth fixing carefully." Then, under it, "But not everything can be fixed by the person who was broken." I folded the letter back along the same lines. My phone kept buzzing. "Mom, Mason, Mom again." I did not answer. That afternoon I made copies of everything. The DNA reports, my screenshots, the email confirming the test, a photo of the will page naming the bird, a scan of my grandmother's letter and the account paperwork tucked behind it. I sent my mother and Victor only what they needed. No commentary. No threats. Just documents. Then one message. "I will not lie about what happened, I will not carry this for you, and I will not return the bird." My mother replied first. "Please meet me, I can explain." I believed she probably could. I also knew I was not ready to make her explanation more important than my injury. Mason left the family group chat 2 days later. No announcement. Just his name disappearing from the thread after someone mentioned an attorney. My father did not call for a week. When he finally texted, it was one sentence. "I don't know what to say." I looked at it for a long time. There had been years when I would have helped him. I would have offered him words. I would have softened the silence so he did not have to sit inside it. This time I set the phone down. He could learn the shape of silence for himself. Months passed. Not cleanly. Healing did not arrive like a scene change. It came in ordinary pieces. A grocery list without dread. A Sunday morning without checking my phone. A night when I slept through rain. I moved to a smaller apartment with better light, the kind of place where the windows faced east and the floors creaked only near the hallway. I put the blue bird on a shelf beside the window. In the morning, the repaired wing caught the sun. The crack was still visible. I liked that. One Saturday, I took my grandmother's letter to her grave. The grass was damp. Someone had left faded flowers near the stone beside hers. I sat on the ground and read the letter out loud slowly, because she had written it slowly, and some words deserved to be returned with care. When I finished, I folded it and held it in my lap. For most of my life, I thought belonging meant being claimed by the people at the table. I know better now. Sometimes belonging is a legal line in an old will. Sometimes it is a hidden letter inside a broken bird. Sometimes it is leaving before people can turn your pain into their inconvenience. My father once said I was nothing like him. At the time, he meant it as a wound. In the end, it became the kindest truth he ever gave me.